Welcome to the Narcissist Slayers podcast with your hosts, Hope Jay
and Lynn Catalano.
Every episode, we focus on recovery from narcissistic abuse. We talk about topics that we believe will help people to identify signs of abuse, learn strategies to cope, and most importantly, how to heal and move forward from narcissistic abuse. We are both survivors of narcissistic abuse ourselves, lawyers, and one of us is an author.
Well, thank you, Hope. My book, Wrecking Ball Relationships, How to Identify, Live With, or Leave the Narcissist in Your Life, is available in many places, including my website, lynncatalano.com.
Because we have been in your shoes, we know how difficult this journey can be. That is why I founded the Center for Hope of Western New York, a nonprofit organization which provides education, support, and advocacy for survivors of narcissistic abuse. You can find out more about the Center for Hope at centerforhopewny.org, and all donations are gratefully welcomed and tax exempt.
Please follow us on Instagram at NarcSlayersPod, and also on Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube, the Narcissist Slayers Podcast. You can also email us directly with your questions at narcslayers@centerforhopewny.org. Thank you so much for joining the Narcissist Slayers podcast again. I'm your co-host, Lynn Catalano.
And I'm your co-host, Hope Jay.
And today we are joined by an esteemed guest. We have Dr. Monica Borschel. She's a trauma and divorce coach, a psychological associate in California, and a psychologist in Hong Kong. She specializes in trauma, loss, and attachment. She's originally from Salt Lake City, Utah, and has a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from the University of Utah. She's a master's in clinical psychology from Columbia University and a doctorate in social work and social administration from the University of Hong Kong. And now she's pursuing a doctorate in psychology in California. Her training qualifications include certifications in brain spotting and high conflict coaching. Welcome, Dr. Monica.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
I know that we have a lot of questions for you. Hope and I are very interested. We love to learn more about trauma and high conflict coaching. I personally feel like high conflict is the PC way to describe someone who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder. That's only my humble opinion, but perhaps there's more to it than that. But let's get started. Can you share your background and what led you to specialize in helping people overcome abuse and trauma, as well as relationship challenges?
Sure. So my master's and my PhD, I was studying grief, and my PhD is grief and attachment. And so when I was working in Hong Kong, I took a family mediation course, and the mediator, Robin Huworth, was amazing. She let me give like a little presentation about attachment to the lawyers. And so they kind of were like, this is great for parenting or custody evaluations. And so they started to pull me in. And along the way, I noticed how much trauma was involved in divorce, grief. So I started to learn more about trauma. So I'm also certified in EMDR. And that's how I came into brain spotting. And brain spotting is an offshoot of EMDR, basically.
That's an awful lot of relevant experience that you have, Dr. Monica. I wasn't aware that you worked with family law attorneys.
Yeah, and so that's what I'm doing now as well. As a psychology associate, I'm learning more about parenting evaluations and custody evaluations.
And it's so important to us as family law attorneys that we have experienced, educated evaluators who understand these kinds of dynamics. It's so important because of how these evaluations impact families' lives and children's lives. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you.
So, what would you say are the most common struggles that people face when recovering from abusive relationships or traumatic experiences? And how do you approach helping them heal?
So, there's abuse and there's trauma, and yes, they kind of overlap, but people who have been abused, they have a lot of shame, lots and lots of shame, and sometimes people with trauma as well. And what I'd really like people to understand is that shame doesn't belong to them. It belongs to the abuser. And sometimes the abuser they don't recognize the shame, so they project it onto the victim. And so people who've been abused have a lot of trust issues and they blame themselves. How come I didn't see this? Why did I do that? How did I get involved with this person? And they have a lot of cognitive dissonance because
Yes.
people are kind and empathetic and they haven't had an experience of being gaslit or cheated on or betrayed or lied to at such a high level, verbally or emotionally abused. They're confused. Is this real? How could someone really act like that? It doesn't make sense to me. And so there's the cognitive dissonance, the shame, the trust issues. And then trauma is very broad, right? And so depending on what kind of trauma you've had, it could be avoidance, avoiding things that remind you of the trauma, people and places. And some people seek it out. So let's say I got in a car accident. Maybe I'm going to get in my car and drive crazy, or maybe I'm just going to avoid driving ever again.
Hmm.
I mean, that's an extreme example, but yeah.
People react to trauma differently
Yes.
depending on, right. But you really, I think, hit the nail on the head when you were describing abuse survivors and the level of shame that they experience and cognitive dissonance that they experience, and encountering somebody like this, a
Yeah.
narcissist, narcissistic sociopaths on that spectrum. And I know that Lynn and I deal with this every day too, that we are, we're talking to people who have just experienced somebody like this, maybe for the first time, and they can't, you're absolutely right. They can't imagine a world, because don't we project our own values onto other people and expect that other people have the same level of compassion and empathy? And it takes a really long time for them to process that this person does not love, does not bond, does not have the same capacity for empathy that you do. So, I mean, I did ask you, and I know it was a very broad question, but I'm curious if you could just be a little bit more specific with how would you approach helping that person, that woman that I know that we all are dealing with and helping every day? How would you approach helping that person heal?
So the person who's been abused or emotionally or verbally abused, there's a lot to it, right? So first is that inner critic that I like to work with. So let's say you've been verbally or emotionally abused, and this could also be from childhood. The outer critic, the abuser, is saying all kinds of things. You're stupid, you're fat, you're ugly, whatever. It gets internalized. And so that becomes an inner critic. And so that's the first thing we need to work with is recognizing that inner critic and then counteracting it with self-compassion.
Mm.
So the abuser told me I'm an idiot. And then my self-compassionate voice could be the voice I use with my kids, my pets, people I love. Would say, you're not an idiot. You've done well. Keep going. So there's the inner critic and the self-compassion. And then there's learning to trust yourself again. Right? So my instincts led me down the wrong path and I married the wrong person. I got involved with the wrong person. And maybe along the way, they noticed the red flags, but they chose to ignore it because cognitive dissonance
Hmm.
or gaslighting, crazy making. And so it's learning to trust yourself. And you can do that by noticing your body, right? What's going on? The alarm bells. So when you have PTSD or complex trauma, sometimes your alarm bells are faulty. They're going off all the time.
Yeah.
And so you're learning what's a false alarm, a real alarm, looping in your head when you get really anxious and the thoughts loop and loop and loop, dropping into your body. What's going on in my body? Can I just sit with my breath? Can I notice the body sensations so I can get out of my head and stop looping? And then the shame. The shame can be tricky, right? Learning to forgive yourself.
Yeah, those are all That's a really great advice, and I think that's going to resonate with our listening audience for sure.
Yeah. I love that you, do you work on breath work with your clients?
Well, part of EMDR and brain spotting is always checking in with your body, checking in with your body. And a lot of people will be like, and during an EMDR set or after, they'll be like, oh, I notice I'm breathing really shallow. So they'll naturally start breathing. And then they'll leave and I'll ask them to notice their breath and things like that. Most people kind of understand breath work because it's
Right.
all over the place.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of people will say it.
I do find, ironically, my clients are not familiar with breath work.
Interesting.
And I
Okay.
often talk about that because,
Yeah.
I do feel like you're talking about grounding your body and really like feeling all those emotions that are occurring when these things are triggering you. I think all of that is so incredibly important. So, yes, agreed. In your experience, what are some of the most effective strategies for rebuilding this self-worth? Here you're talking about how shame has damaged, the trauma has affected all of us so much, right? So how do you rebuild that self-worth and confidence after a difficult breakup or divorce?
Yeah, and it takes time, and I'm sure you've seen that too, right? People come in so devastated during a divorce. So first is self-compassion, lots and lots of it. I don't think people recognize a lot of the time how harsh they are with themselves. And then once you start trusting yourself a little bit more, building those wins. So when we have wins, our self-worth goes up, and when we have losses, our self-worth goes down. And so it makes a lot of sense, right? In a divorce, the losses just pile up. And so how do we get those wins? Do you need to learn something? Do you need to work on your career and get some wins? Make some friends and get some wins? Yeah, things like that.
All right. I like that. I like that. Get some wins.
Yeah.
I do
And
like.
then take in the wins, right? Because some people are like, not a big deal. And they focus too much on the loss instead of, okay, well, what am I accomplishing? Where are my wins? And then
Yeah.
allowing yourself to take in those wins.
I like that perspective. I think it's an interesting way to help people try to focus on the good. But I think, at least when you're dealing with somebody who's in crisis mode, and that is what I'm dealing with every day as a divorce attorney. And I know that it sounds like you are also dealing with that, Dr. Monica. I almost feel like it's a triage situation. Like you have to kind of like attend to, because like as you said earlier, there's just so much coming in, so many losses. And so people's emotional regulation systems are all over the place. And I know as an attorney, it's most challenging for me when my clients don't have the ability to regulate their emotions, and it's just
Yes.
all coming at me, and I have to try to find a way to
Yeah.
field all of this emotional stuff that's coming at me, and try and help them through this. And I'm not in the capacity as a counselor, although I do have an MSW. I try to stay in my lane, right? So how would you say that you help them to achieve emotional regulation and develop healthier emotional coping mechanisms?
Yes. And to your point, in the beginning, people are very dysregulated, right? And so there's so many things that go into emotional regulation. Again, the cognitive stuff and the frustration tolerance, right? So people have a stress band and it breaks during a divorce sometimes. So telling yourself, I can tolerate it, I can handle it, I can get through this. And then people with PTSD and trauma, sometimes they're always waiting for that other shoe to drop. And that's part of the dysregulation. So, what if this happens? And what if I have a plan A, B, C, D, E, and F? But you can tell people, well, we don't know. That what if may never happen. And so the worry is not really helping you. Because our brains trick us to think worry is productive, but it's counterproductive. And so again, going to that looping, what if he or she comes after me? What if he or she takes the kids? What if? There's the shoe waiting to drop. So staying present and telling yourself, if that happens, I can handle it. And if you're pretty sure it's going to happen, write it out, see it on the paper, come up with a plan. So your brain can see it. Okay, I have a plan. If that happens, it's right there. And then going back into the body again. So the more you're attuned to your body, the more you can regulate. Oh, I'm feeling activated. There goes my anxiety. There goes whatever. Okay, my nervous system's up here. How do I bring it down? Whether that's mindfulness, meditation, and it's different for everyone. Going for a walk, exercising, and I'd recommend everyone exercise. It's very helpful. Calling a friend. So it's being very aware. So I'm up, okay, I bring my nervous system down. I'm down, I'm depressed, I can't get out of bed. Okay, we got to do something about that. So depression is a liar too, right? I can't do this, I can't handle it. You have to tell yourself you can handle it. Just get out of bed and go slow, right? Just go slow. So when people are grieving, I say, only do what you have to do. What's the priority for the day? If the dishes are dirty, oh well, leave it. If you don't have the energy to wash your hair, leave it, right? But you need to take care of the kids. You need to get to work. So another thing is, I wake up, I'm feeling really awful because grief tends to hit in the morning and night. You can kind of make time, go into your body. Oh, the grief's in my heart. Feel it. Don't run away from it. Don't push it down. Just allow it to be. And then you can set an alarm. Okay, I got to get up. I got to go take the kids to school. I got to get to work. Imagine a container. Okay, I'm putting the grief in the container. And when I get home, I'll open the container and sit with my grief again. So that way you're kind of telling yourself when it's okay to feel these feelings and when you have to be focused.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
I know that this next question is going to hit home with hope. It's ironic that I'm asking it, but co-parenting can be challenging, especially after divorce, breakup. What advice or strategies do you offer to clients who are struggling with the co-parenting dynamics? And do you do a lot of that?
I do a little bit, yes, and it is very hard. And I think you guys are probably familiar with Bill Eddy and Biff.
I'm not, but
Oh, okay. So, like Hopi also is this. I think he's a licensed social worker, but he's also. I don't want to mess this up. He's a mediator. I'm not sure if he has a law degree or not. So,
Okay.
sorry, Bill Eddy, if you're listening, but he has something called the High Conflict Institute, and you can look it up. And he writes Biff books, Biff. It's brief.
It sounds very familiar to
Yeah.
me. At some point along the line, I've definitely come across this, but refresh our recollection.
yes.
So he has a co-parenting book, Biff, brief, informative, friendly, and firm. And so, as you know, if you
Yes, I've read about this. Yes, yes, I have. Yep.
They'll turn your words.
In fact, I might have quoted him in something recently. I didn't recall the name. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. He's quite familiar in the law community. So that's a way to communicate, right? Because as you know, they'll turn your words on you.
Yep.
They'll pick holes in everything you say.
It's gray rock. It's essentially gray rock, and that's what I was using it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so setting the boundaries, being firm, but also being friendly. It doesn't mean you overdo it with the friendliness, but it's civil. So people have a hard time with that.
Oh gosh, they do. Oh gosh, they do.
They cheated. Okay, so that means there's a lot of hooks in you from the other person.
That's right.
The abuse is left like, I call it hooks. Every time they call, there goes my anxiety. Right. Oh, I got an email. This is a hook. And where are you feeling that hook in your body? And so those are things you need to process with someone, a trauma therapist, to understand how those hooks are getting in and why they're there. And so, from Brooke, I took the Brooke Olson High Conflict course, and what he taught us is the 1/3 rule, which is helpful when I'm dealing with a high conflict co-parenting. 1/3, what am I feeling? So, okay, these high conflict people are making me sweat a little, which normally happens. And 1/3, what are they feeling? Okay, well, he's angry, she's crying, okay. And then 1/3 grounding. Because if I focus 100% on what I'm feeling, I might freeze. If I focus 100% on what they're feeling, I might also get overwhelmed. So if you are dealing with a high conflict ex, first noticing, okay, I'm scared to talk to them, but I'm not going to put all my attention here. I'm going to see what they're doing, right? Kind of the opposite of observation. Because if you're dealing with a narcissist, of course, they're observing you. So you're going to flip it and observe them. Oh, they're angry, and that makes me a little anxious. So what 1/3, what's happening in my environment? What can I smell? What can I hear? Pushing your feet into the ground to ground. And that way you're not kind of getting those hooks in because you're not focused 100% on them or yourself. So that's one thing. Plus the biff. Plus, going back to the container, I'm not in a place to answer this email. I'm not in a place to answer this text. So I'll wait. I'll wait until I'm grounded, until I'm emotionally ready, and don't react, right? So, oh, I just got a nasty text. My first instinct is to be like, send it back. Nasty. Take a step back. Think about it. Because again, if you're dealing with a narcissist, yes, they react, but they also scheme and plan, right? And so you send an email or a text, you'll notice they don't always answer because they need a day or two to kind of play chess, right? And find the in and come right back at you. So, yeah, just a few tips.
Those are great tips. And Lynn and I have done, multiple podcasts where we've addressed this issue and
Yeah,
how to avoid being triggered by the narcissist. It's just a universal problem, and it's particularly challenging and difficult when you're going through a divorce.
yes.
And all of that information that you just gave, I think, is great information. I give the same, although I've never referred to triggers as hooks. I kind of like that. I think it's because it is a
Yeah,
hook.
it gets you.
It's in you, right? And you have to you have to remove that hook. And having that awareness, I think that's the biggest challenge. Dr. Monica, would you agree that it's
Yeah.
having that level of self-awareness, because you're so ingrained, these patterns are so ingrained, and they understand exactly what to say and what to do to, reactivate that hook or activate that hook. So other than just kind of being aware, it's so difficult to try to help people to figure out how to get themselves out of this pattern. And I'm sure
Yes.
that you spend a lot of time working with people as well on this issue.
Yeah, and it's especially hard when this high conflict person is abusing you through the court system.
Right.
They're filing motion after motion after motion, and you're like, I can't afford all these lawyer bills, or
Yes.
they're smearing you in the paperwork, they're lying in the paperwork, they're playing victim, they're crying on the stand,
All of it. Yep.
so hard.
Yep.
So it's like getting out of that despair and helplessness, and it takes a lot of strategy, which is why I'm very glad there's family law attorneys, right? Because I don't understand the legal strategy at all. But you do need a good lawyer if you're divorcing a high conflict person.
Absolutely. We also say that and give that advice all the time.
Yes.
So our next question may be a little bit like off the topic of what we're talking about, but I think it's important. What are some common misconceptions that people have about the healing process after abuse?
Yeah. So people think they're broken. And
Mm,
if you've been sexually assaulted, you feel contaminated. I mean, I should say some people. So understanding you're not broken, you're not contaminated. And if you want to enter trauma therapy, it can be very hard because then, oh my gosh, I have to talk about this and I have to activate myself and I have to go there. I don't want to go there. So I'm going to stuff it down, avoid, 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 avoid. But this is where we get our reactions, right? So when you do the trauma work, it's kind of what we were talking about, calming your nervous system. so that you can respond and not react, right? So you can't avoid it, you can't run away from it. You see this a lot with PTSD in men
Mm,
because men struggle sometimes to talk about feelings. They will react big and they will have
yeah.
really big rage, and that could look like narcissism. The difference is if a man with PTSD that maybe he's been in the military, a firefighter, whatever, he has a big reaction, it can be very verbally abusive. But it will normally be followed by shame, like a deep, deep shame. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. I feel so awful. Versus a high conflict person will be like, well, it's your fault.
Right.
That's what it is. You made me do it. And
Right.
if you didn't do this, and this wouldn't have happened. Right. Um, I don't know if that answers your question. I might have.
Yeah, I mean, it does. And I wondered if you might just spend a moment or two just talking a little bit about EMDR. I don't know that we've ever had anybody on who has this training, and I think it's so important. If you could just explain a little bit about how you use EMDR with abuse victims and trauma victims.
Sure. And again, I apologize if I get this name wrong, but I think it's Dan Siegel who came up with why this works. So this is our limbic system, right? This is where trauma, anxiety, anger live. This is our reptile brain. This is what makes us react. And so if I've had a lot of trauma, then my hippocampus, which normally scans the environment for novelty, starts scanning for threat. And when my hippocampus or my limbic system is lit up all the time, this is our alarm bells, then my thalamus goes offline and I can't reach my frontal lobe. So this is what you're talking about, people in crisis mode. They come in, they can't think. And you've probably seen that, like, they're just so
Yes,
emotional and you're like, okay, it's okay. We'll come up with a strategy, and they can't get there. They can't remember names, dates, when the event happened
sure.
because they're offline. And so EMDR kind of distracts your eyes. It's an eye movement. It distracts your eyes, which distracts your hippocampus so that your brain can go back online. So you're processing trauma
Ah,
basically through your limbic system and your eyes. And that's how brain spotting works as well. And so instead of your eyes moving, you're looking at one point. Um, so because our eyes are directly linked to our limbic system, right? Because we see danger, we run, we freeze.
that's
Wow.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a little bit weird, and they've done a lot of studies like, why does this work? How does this work? But the studies show, yeah, it does decrease the activation level.
And you see
So,
success in working
oh,
with
lots,
abuse victim. Yes.
lots and lots with EMDR and brain spotting because it's allowing them to process, and they don't have to talk about it if they don't want to. All I need to know is, are you getting more activated or less activated, so I can change what I'm doing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's it's weird. Especially brain spotting is super weird, but it's really useful. And part of it is because people are dropping down into their body, right? So you always say, okay, what are you noticing now? What's happening in your body now? And so the goal of EMDR and brain spotting is to say, not to say this never happened. Yes, it happened. It's just that the weight is gone. So I can think about this abuser and it's like, I feel nothing, you know? So you can get back here and start planning the way they're planning.
So you're not stuck in fight or flight your
Yeah,
whole
basically.
life long. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
It's
you're not
beautiful. Yeah.
fight or flight.
Wow. That was really I feel like we're going to be talking about that for a while
I
now.
think so. Yeah.
Well, um, Dr. Monica, I want to ask you about when you're helping someone navigate relationship issues. Um, we talk a lot about red flags.
Yeah.
Certainly, when you're dealing with someone who suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, it's fairly easy to identify those things to look for. But what do you encourage your clients to look out for in their next chapter in a future relationship, um, based on all of this?
Yeah, I think the biggest red flag is isolating. right? Starting to say, okay, your friends and family are bad, they don't like me, um, they're negative influences. That's the biggest one, because that is by far the most dangerous. If I isolate you, you can't tell anyone about the abuse.
Yeah.
And then there's other subtler signs, right? And so in the beginning, it's hard to tell because people wear a mask. I want you to like me, right? So it's always that triangle. Victim, what is it? Victim, rescuer, offender. They might come into your life as a rescuer. Oh, you're poor. Let me help you out. Or, oh, you're going through a divorce, you poor thing. Let me help you. And then they'll turn to the abuser. Or they could come in as a victim, right? And so if you have a high empathy, you have to be very careful of the victim. So first they might charm you and then play victim, charm you and then play rescuer. Of course, victims are real, but some people play victim to pull you in so they can hook you. And that's a hook. Your empathy can be a hook, right? And so your vulnerabilities could be a hook for them to be a rescuer. And so it gets so tricky, right? Because some people really do want to help you, and some people really are a victim. Um, so those are kind of more of the bigger red flags to look out for. And lack of empathy is a big one. So that doesn't mean a narcissist can't fake empathy. They
Right.
can very well, right? And that's how they come in as the rescuer. So noticing, okay, how do I feel about this person? In the beginning, no matter what relationship, if you love someone or are attracted to them, we feel good. It's our chemicals in our body, right? But over time, is my self-worth dropping? Am I losing friends and family? How is this person kind of sucking the life out of me, the energy? How much are they taking versus how much they're giving? Things like that. And again, it happens over time, right? So don't rush into a relationship, right? Do not rush into a relationship because a narcissist will want to rush you into it.
And that's a major red flag. Yeah.
Yeah.
When they're
Right.
pushing. And that's kind of a great segue to our next question. It's all about boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So, how do you support your clients in establishing healthy boundaries, especially after they've come out of a relationship like this?
Yeah, because they don't even know what boundaries are
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Because
If they
maybe
ever
they,
did. Right.
yeah, if they ever did, exactly. So you can set a boundary with a narcissist, such as, please don't call me after 6 p.m. Of course, they're going to call you after 6 p.m. and they're going to push and push and push. And that's where people get stuck. They're walking all over my boundaries. So please don't call me after 6 p.m. If you call me after 6 p.m., I will not answer. So there's the consequence.
Right.
So you don't answer after 6. If you continue to speak negatively about my friends or family, I'm leaving. Whether that's leaving the room, hanging up the phone, just leaving, right? Getting out of there. If you shout at me, I will leave. And you leave. You physically leave. Because there has to be a consequence. And so understanding their motivation. What do they want from me? Oh, they like it when I'm angry. So I have to make sure I'm setting boundaries around everything that makes me angry. And then the consequences, I leave and go ground. Right. And you have to set it over and over again. So basically, it's like this. How much of what you're asking me is going to cost me? If we look at it in economic terms,
Well,
if you ask me to take the kids for the weekend and I don't already have plans and I'm home and I'd love to do that, the cost to me is very low. But if I already told you I have a really important work meeting outside of the state, outside of the city, I am not there, I'm not going to cancel my business trip to watch the kids for you because the cost is too high, right? So, how much does this benefit me and how much does this cost me? If it's no benefit and no cost, that's okay. But if the cost is high, don't do it. And so that could be emotional energy, physical energy, financial, right? All of that.
I
Well,
use
isn't it? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lynn.
I was going to say I use the cost benefit analysis with my clients so much. Um,
Yes.
a lot of the time, I'm using it to talk about trust, which is interesting,
Right.
but
That
same concept. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Hope.
And the other thing I wanted to add is, when I talk to people about setting boundaries with narcissists, if you give them an inch,
Yes.
they're gonna take the whole the whole thing. So it's crucial to set and enforce boundaries, because setting boundaries and not enforcing them is just, emboldening them, right? That's how they know that you are a person that they can continue to manipulate. That actually makes you more attractive to a narcissist if you threaten and don't ever do anything about it, because they move the goalposts all the time, right? So if they recognize that they can do this with you, then you're sort of someone that is attractive to them. So I think a good litmus test when you are getting back out there, and I tell people this all the time, and I think Lynn does as well, is that what happens when you set a boundary? Because if they're unable to respect it and they're unable to, uh, you know, um, agree with what the boundary that you set, or respect the boundary that you set, and they try to push past it or manipulate you out of your boundary, that as far as I'm concerned, even one instance of that is enough.
Yeah,
because
you're
pe-
right.
because people who are healthy people are not going to push your boundaries. They're not going to try to find ways around your boundaries. They're not going to try to talk you out of your boundaries. They're simply going to say, okay, I respect that. And but a narcissist won't. And I think that's kind of, when you see that happening, if you're starting to date somebody, that's a person that you want to say, nope. That
Exactly.
you wouldn't have done that in the past, because you wouldn't have understood what was going on. So,
Yes, exactly. And so, yeah, that's a big red flag. That's another one, right? This person doesn't respect my boundaries.
right.
Yes. Dr. Monica, I want to ask you a question about forgiveness. And I know that with my clients, it's a very difficult topic. They come in very, very hurt and angry and filled with everything that you've talked about, shame and embarrassment and guilt. Um, but like, what's the role of forgiveness in the healing process from past relationships? And how do you approach this concept with your clients?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I would never ask my clients to forgive their abuser ever.
Right.
The more they heal, it comes naturally. And it's not that what they did was okay. It's certainly not. It's That's not okay. And I won't allow this ever again from you or anyone else. But I can let it go because I'm forgiving you for me, not for you. Because if I hate you and I'm angry and I want revenge myself, that's a lot of toxic stuff in my body. And that is going to make me sick, physically sick. So it's not that what you did is okay, but I'm not going to allow myself to be burdened by your abuse.
Very, very meaningful. Absolutely. Agreed.
As we conclude the interview, Dr. Monica, we have one last question for you.
Okay.
What would you say would be the most important tools or resources that you encourage your clients to use as they continue their journey toward healing, self-love, and healthier relationships? Do you have some recommendations for certain? I mean, I know you mentioned breathing exercises and being grounded in your body, but are there any other things that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, so being aware of your body is very helpful to bring your nervous system down. But also prioritizing yourself. Because if you've been in a relationship with an abuser, your needs are nowhere to be seen. And so some people, they don't even know what they need after they get out of a relationship like that. So I usually give them a needs list. Like, these are some common human needs, and some people will take days with it. I don't know what I need. So, okay, prioritizing my needs, which means I might need to figure out what my needs are. Um, Prioritizing my physical and mental health, not putting everyone else before me, which is kind of how they might have attracted an abuser. I'm not blaming the victim by any means,
No.
but if you have high empathy, you put yourself behind others,
Yep.
which is, you can't set the boundaries, then you can become a target, right? Because you're someone who can be taken advantage of. And again, if this happened to you, I don't want you to blame yourself because it's not helpful. It's okay, well, I made a mistake. How do I get out of this?
Right. Dr. Monica, do you have a way if our listeners want to get in touch with you or find you on social media? Do you want to give some of your information?
Sure. So I am on Facebook for now until they kick me off. They keep trying, I don't know why. Instagram, LinkedIn, and I have a website. So if you Google my name, Monica Borschel, you'll see all of that.
Well, thank you so much. I think this was a really important information. We really enjoyed having you on, and we'll see you next time on the Narcissist Layers.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Take
you.
care.